Meccano, part number 207, table lamp, from the 1930s lighting set. The part number 206, a lampshade. Hi and welcome back. When I first left school, employment in my hometown was non-existent. With little options, I joined a government YTS scheme, or Youth Training Scheme. My placement was with Dermeside District Council Parks and Gardens Department, and as I worked through each section, one by one, I ended up spending some time working in the local cemetery. I was introduced to the wheelbarrow, and the work it did. One hot summer afternoon, after a long day of moving sand and gravel that was being stored there, we sat in the barrows, enjoying a break and a mug of tea. A wheelbarrow makes for a very comfortable seat to rest in. My own garden barrow was rescued from a skip on the side of the road. The bucket rusted through and the wheel flat. It has since had a new bucket fitted, a new tyre put on it, replacement wheel, and other work carried out, and I'm reminded of the TV show Only Fools and Horses, where Trigger gets an award for having looked after his broom for 20 years. He'd never had a new broom from stores, having replaced the head 70 times and 40 new handles. I guess my humble skip rescue is about in the same place. But what about a wheelbarrow and its origins? After all things have a beginning. But I also want to tell you another story today in the opening of this script. In the late 1960s, America was working on a naval fighter experiment program known as the VFX program, which gave the US Navy the F-14 Tomcat. Partway through the build, information started to come out of the then USSR of an aircraft that matched exactly the prototype F-14. At the time, Grumman, the designers of the Tomcat, had a proverbial meltdown and commenced on a witch hunt to find the spy, which they couldn't. But not all is what it seemed. After the USSR fell, Grumman designers met for the first time with designers from Mikoyan, the aircraft manufacturer which has produced the MiG range. While in discussion, the question of how the Russians had managed to get hold of the plans for the then secret F-14 came up. The Russian designers had the same question of how the Americans had managed to get their secret plans. It turned out that both designers had come up with the same problem at the same time. And using engineering, they'd both solved the problem in the same way. The Russian design never took off as the engines failed to give us the thrust that it needed, and they decided to move away from aircraft carriers and focus instead on submarines for defence. The Americans gave us the F-14 and the film Top Gun. So, what of the wheelbarrow and its history? The wheelbarrow is over 2,000 years old, and the first evidence of it is on the carving on the side of a brick from a tomb that dates back to the Han Dynasty in China. The date recorded for the tomb is 118 AD, but other evidence shows designs dating back as far as 206 BC, and they were called the Lu Chi, or deer cart. This is over 1,000 years before we have evidence of wheelbarrows in Europe. The design is different to ours now, as the wheel is roughly half the height of the man pushing, and it's not possible to tell if it has a cargo bed or a box-cum-bucket arrangement like our wheelbarrows. The design of the Chinese wheelbarrow is credited to Zhu Lang, a Chinese statesman and military strategist who designed a wheelbarrow called the wooden ox and another design called the flowing horse. The wooden ox was a front wheelbarrowed with an ability to carry 200 pounds of stores and was pulled from the front, in the same manner that you would lead an ox on a yoke, with a man at the back to steer the barrow. The flowing horse was a similar design that was to be pushed from the rear with people to either side to help over rough terrain. The designs proved very useful in the campaign against the WWII in the early part of the 1st century AD, allowing supplies to be sent to the front quickly and using fewer pack animals. But they weren't the only Chinese wheelbarrow designs. The next design has a large central wheel with pictures showing the wheel to be the size of a man, and is called the gliding horse. These barrows were still in use in the 20th century. The central wheel allowed for a near perfect load balance over the central axle, and could carry up to 6 adults with minimal effort for the person pushing, and were often seen being pulled by a pack animal as well to allow for heavier loads. The last type of Chinese wheelbarrow is the sail-powered barrow. The Chinese have had land yachts as far back as the 6th century AD, but the addition of a large sail in the region of 6 foot tall by 3 foot wide allowed for the operator to use less energy over longer journeys, as the wind would assist to provide power. But the deer cart remained the most common design in China. The Chinese designs that spanned nearly 2,500 years of development helped to make the nation become a powerhouse for engineering and sciences. Our ability to transport goods easily to market or abroad is essential for a stable society. It took Europe and America until the 19th century to be able to transport our goods with great ease, at which point the Chinese Empire was on the decline. The European wheelbarrow does not appear in reference work until around the 13th century, and even then is limited to France, England and the Low Countries. It is always of the front wheel design with a cargo space behind the wheel, and it proves itself useful in construction, mining and agriculture. But for all that, it remains rare, and very few examples have been found. In fact, the ones that have survived have only dated back to the middle of the 16th century. To return to the story of the F-14, where did our wheelbarrows come from? Because there are 2 options. The first is that they travelled along the Silk Road, either as physical examples that could be seen and examined, which would explain why the WWII is the only type of wheelbarrow in Europe, or in drawing form, either as the idea is explained to somebody or in a tapestry. The other option is that to solve the same problem of moving things around a building site, an engineer, or craftsman as they would have been, came up with the same solution to the same problem. Both options are valid ones. At the time of the appearance of the wheelbarrow in Europe, we were fighting crusades in the Holy Land. This is the end of the Silk Road. If ever we were to see an example of the WWII, it would be there. But equally, the idea of inventing a native wheelbarrow in Europe is as feasible. I can imagine somebody trying to use a cart to move something around a site, and a craftsman thinking, I can make that better by doing this. But either way, lacking the lighter, stronger wood that bamboo gives to the Chinese, we were limited to heavier woods that we have in Europe, making the European wheelbarrow less efficient than the Chinese one. At some point in the last century, the metal wheelbarrow appeared. There is no exact date or point when it happened. I have a set of apprentice woodworking books, The Practical Woodworker by Bernard E. Jones. There is a section that covers 4 different designs, from the simplest option through the garden or stable barrow to an alternative design, and lastly a wheelbarrow with movable sides. There is even a section discussing design and the importance of considering what the wheelbarrow was going to be used for. But the designs are all wood. The book dates back to the 1920s. I suspect the metal design is yet another offspring of the Second World War, the conflict that has given us so many inventions and innovations. But without the wheelbarrow, Europe would not be where it is now. The humble wheelbarrow built our canals, moved mountains of earth and rocks to let our railways snake their way across our countries. They are the bedrock of tools that built our roads. Every modern building in every developed country has had a wheelbarrow on site. In the last 2,500 years, this invention has changed the face of the planet, possibly more than any other earth-moving tool, with the exception of the spade and pickaxe. And yet we pay no attention to it. The wheelbarrow has given us the foundation that our society is built on. Its work allows other sciences to build on that beginning. It helps trade all over the world by taking the load and helping us carry it a bit further. And with new powered wheelbarrows on the market to help take the strain of the work, we can carry a heavier loads for longer. I doubt if there are many large workplaces that don't have a barrow on site. Dinky even made a model of one for its garden range of die-cast toys. There are 4 designs now of wheelbarrows. The shallow tray home gardener, the classic builder's barrow used by just about everybody as well as builders, the square tray utility barrow, and the brick barrow. Each one is designed to complete different tasks, with the builder's barrow able to load up to 110 litres of wet and 160 litres of dry. Steel bucketed designs are to take the heavier loads, but can also carry a sharper loads, able to work in conditions that are more adverse. Plastic bucketed designs are able to carry lighter loads, are cheaper to manufacture, and are normally designed for domestic use. And as I finish writing this, the sun is shining in July of 2022. It is a beautiful day, and my wheelbarrow has a cat curled up in it. It's Mac, my grey cat. He is enjoying the shade of the lilac tree, with the wind blowing a gentle breeze to take a bit of the heat off. He's enjoying a cat's life of luxury, with maybe the perfect bed to sleep on for such a beautiful day.